In the distant reaches of space, where starlight barely kissed the void and silence reigned supreme, humanity stood at the edge of extinction. The galactic Concord, a coalition of ancient, mighty civilizations, had decided that Earth, with its reckless tendencies and violent history, was unworthy of a place among the stars. Their decree was absolute. Humanity would remain a quarantined species, its reach tethered to a single, fragile planet. Captain Alaric Vance stared at the decrepit hulk of Starship that now sat docked in Earth's first and only orbital shipyard. The vessel was a gift from the Concord, a derelict relic from a forgotten era, barely space-worthy, and stripped of anything resembling advanced technology. Its hull was pockmarked with micrometeorite scars, its engines wheezed like a dying beast, and its control systems were a tangled mess of archaic circuitry and mismatched components. To the Concord, this ship was a cruel joke, a way to mock humanity's ambitions. To Alaric, it was something far more potent. The shipyard was a marvel of human ingenuity, cobbled together from salvage materials and hard-fought progress. It floated in the shadow of Earth, a stark reminder of humanity's resilience. Around the shipyard, the stars glittered coldly, as if indifferent to the struggles of the tiny blue planet below. Alaric ran a hand through his graying hair, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as he assessed the ship's potential, or lack thereof. A former military strategist turned engineer, he had a mind like a blade, precise, unyielding, and honed by years of war. The Concord's disdain burned in his chest, but beneath the ember of humiliation lay the flicker of determination. "Captain Vance," called a voice from behind. Alaric turned to see Lieutenant Mara Cole, his second in command. She was young, with fiery red hair and a demeanor to match. Her uniform bore the scars of countless repairs, much like the shipyard itself. "They're calling it a mercy," Mara said, her voice laced with venom. "A gesture of goodwill." Alaric snorted. "Goodwill? This is a challenge, Mara. They think we're nothing but scavengers, incapable of building anything that matters. They want us to fail. Then let's prove them wrong." The shipyard bustled with activity. Engineers in patched-up suits swarmed the Starship, their tools sparking as they began the arduous task of bringing it back to life. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and ozone, a symphony of clanks, hums, and muttered curses filling the void. As Alaric strode across the bridge, his boots echoed against the metal floor. The ship's interior was a maze of rusted corridors and failing systems, but he saw its potential. This wasn't just a ship. It was a canvas for rebellion, a vessel that could defy the Concord's arrogance. In the mess hall, Alaric addressed his crew, a motley collection of engineers, scientists, and former soldiers, each one as stubborn and scarred as the ship itself. Their faces bore the weight of years spent under the Concord's thumb, but in their eyes, Alaric saw a spark of defiance. "They think this is a joke," he began, his voice firm and commanding. "A reminder of our place. But this ship, this pile of junk, is an opportunity. It's a chance to show them what humanity is capable of, to prove that we won't be chained to Earth." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "We'll rebuild this ship," Alaric continued, "not as a monument to their pity, but as a weapon they'll never see coming. Earth was a wounded planet. Decades of resource wars and environmental collapse had left scars that even the Concord's intervention couldn't heal. Cities sprawled like open wounds, their neon lights struggling against the encroaching darkness. Yet, Amidst the decay, humanity endured. The shipyard was a testament to this endurance. It floated in low orbit, pieced together from abandoned satellites, space debris, and sheer human will. Inside, it was a labyrinth of narrow corridors, exposed wiring, and humming machinery. The air was thick and stale, but it was home to a crew driven by a singular purpose: to reclaim humanity's place among the stars. The Concord's gift was an insult, but it was also a gamble. In their arrogance, the galactic powers had underestimated humanity's ingenuity and desperation. Alaric knew this was his one chance to strike back. As the crew began their work, tensions simmered beneath the surface. The ship's systems were a nightmare, riddled with alien technology that defied human understanding. Supplies were scarce, and every setback felt like another nail in humanity's coffin. But Alaric thrived in adversity. He saw the ship's flaws not as obstacles, but as challenges to be overcome. Piece by piece, the crew began to transform the relic into something new, something powerful. Late one night, as Alaric pored over schematics in the dim light of the bridge, Mara approached him. "Captain," she said softly, "you're pushing yourself too hard." He looked up, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "We don't have time to rest, Mara. The Concord won't wait for us to catch up." She hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll make it work. We always do." Alaric nodded, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in a sea of possibilities. Outside, the stars continued their silent vigil, unaware, or perhaps uncaring, of the storm brewing within the shipyard. Humanity had been handed a challenge, and against all odds, it was rising to meet it. In the depths of the ship, amidst the flickering lights and hissing pipes, something extraordinary was taking shape. A spark had been lit, and soon it would ignite a fire that would burn across the galaxy. The first failure came without warning. A shrill alarm tore through the shipyard, reverberating off the steel walls like the wail of some wounded beast. Sparks rained down in engineering as a conduit ruptured, bathing the room in flickering crimson light. Lieutenant Mara Cole stumbled backward, shielding her face from the heat as molten metal hissed against the grated floor. "Contain that breach," she barked, voice hoarse over the din. Technicians scrambled, their hands slick with sweat, wrestling with heavy tools and jury-rigged patches. The ship groaned around them, metal warping under the strain of systems it was never designed to handle. Alaric Vance stood on the bridge, gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Status. Power distribution is unstable," barked Chief Engineer Malik, his voice crackling through the comm. "The Concord tech is rejecting our modifications. Every time we push the reactors, the whole system buckles." Alaric's jaw tightened. They were integrating salvaged weapons, human tech grafted onto alien systems, but the ship fought them at every turn. "Divert non-critical power to the stabilizers. I want that reactor steady, Malik. That'll cut life support on Deck 7. Do it." The bridge was tense, shadows cast long by the erratic glow of failing consoles. Alaric's crew exchanged uneasy glances, but said nothing. Orders were orders. Yet the cracks weren't just in the ship. They were in the people too. Strain on the crew. In the cramped mess hall, the air was heavy with frustration. Engineers slumped over untouched meals, and soldiers cleaned weapons that might never fire. The once bright chatter had dulled into muttered complaints. Mara sat opposite Malik, her fingers absently tracing a crack in the table. "They're exhausted," Malik muttered. "We're running on fumes. If the ship doesn't kill us, burnout will." Mara's gaze darkened. "Alaric won't stop. Not until this thing flies. And if it doesn't..." Malik's voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't answer. Alaric watched them from a distance, sensing the slow erosion of morale. It gnawed at him, but he buried it beneath layers of command. Doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet, even he couldn't ignore the mounting pressure. The Concord's hand tightens. News traveled fast across the void. The Concord had heard whispers of humanity's efforts, and they were displeased. A transmission cut through the static one evening, its tone as cold as the stars. "To the human vessel, this endeavor violates the terms of your containment. Cease all modifications immediately, or face sanctions. No face, no name, just a voice, sterile and absolute." Alaric stared at the message, the words burning into his mind. "They're watching," Mara said quietly beside him. "Let them." But the threat wasn't idle. Hours later, orbital sensors detected Concord probes skimming the edge of Earth's atmosphere, silent and menacing. Their presence wasn't subtle. It was a warning. And then, sabotage. An explosion rocked the lower hangar. Supplies, precious and irreplaceable, were gone in an instant. Fires raged before emergency systems could smother them. 2 crew members were dead. "Internal breach," Malik confirmed grimly. This wasn't an accident. Saboteurs, whether agents of the Concord or traitors among them, the message was clear. They were vulnerable. Alaric gathered his senior officers in the war room, the air tense with smoke and anger. "They want us afraid," he said. "They want us to stop. But what if they come for us directly?" Mara challenged. Alaric's eyes were cold steel. "Then we make sure this ship is ready." Breaking points. The pressure mounted. Each day brought fresh failures. Engines misfired. Weapons systems malfunctioned. Supplies dwindled. And yet they pushed forward. But the toll was personal. Alaric stood alone in the observation deck, gazing at Earth, a distant marble cloaked in clouds. His reflection in the glass was older than he remembered. "This is bigger than me," he murmured, the words lost in the hum of the ship. Mara found him there hours later. "They're scared, Alaric. Not just of the Concord. Of you." He didn't turn. "Fear keeps them sharp. It also breaks them." Silence stretched between them. "Maybe they need to break," Alaric finally said, "so we can rebuild stronger." But even he wasn't sure if he believed it. The crew grew suspicious. Eyes lingered too long. Words turned sharp. And then, the saboteur was caught. Ellen Voss, a communications officer. She stood in the brig, defiant even as bruises blossomed along her jaw. "I did what I had to," she spat. "This ship is a death sentence. The Concord will burn us for this. You killed your own." Mara's fists clenched. Ellen sneered. "And how many more will die if we keep pushing? You think this Hulk will save us? It'll doom us all." Alaric stared at her, emotionless. Lock her down. Full isolation. But her words lingered, sowing seeds of doubt. The Concord's probes drew closer, now openly scanning the shipyard. Their cold, mechanical eyes catalogued every change. And then came the blockade. 3 Concord frigates, sleek and deadly, slipped into orbit. Their weapons remained cold, but their message was clear. Any further action would be met with force. Alaric stood on the bridge, watching them through the viewport. "They're daring us to make a move," Malik muttered. Alaric's lips thinned. "Then let's give them something to fear." In the depths of the ship, systems groaned as weapons powered up. Imperfect, unstable, but lethal. The Concord thought they could intimidate humanity into submission. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had left the door open, and Alaric Vance intended to kick it down. The void was silent, but the air aboard the ship pulsed with tension. Alaric Vance stood on the bridge, staring down the looming threat of the 3 Concord frigates that hung in orbit like wolves circling wounded prey. Their hulls gleamed with precision engineering, bristling with weapons that could shatter the derelict ship they had so graciously bestowed upon humanity. But this was no longer the same rusting relic. Every deck, every system, every fractured plate had been reforged by human hands. What was once a derelict coffin now hummed with a dangerous, unstable power, a superweapon born not from wealth or resources, but from desperation and defiance. "Status report," Alaric commanded, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Mara's fingers flew over the console, her expression hard. Weapons systems online. Shields holding, but barely. Engines are stable, for now. And the core. Malik's voice crackled through the comms from engineering. "Running hot, Captain. Too hot. We push it any further, and the reactor could blow. But she'll hold for now." Alaric nodded. For now would have to be enough. The Concord had sent a final transmission. One Alaric had not bothered to answer. Stand down. Disarm. Submit. They had underestimated humanity's resolve. "Bring targeting systems online," Alaric ordered. The bridge crew moved in tense, synchronized silence. The lead Concord frigate inched forward, weapons slowly powering up. They were waiting for humanity to blink first. "Captain," Mara murmured, "we can't outgun them." Alaric's eyes were ice. "We won't need to." Deep within the ship, Malik and his engineering team worked frantically, their hands slick with sweat. The reactor was pushing beyond its limits, feeding power into a weapon that was never meant to exist. A repurposed Concord energy cannon, modified, overclocked, and dangerously unstable. If it fired, it could rip through the lead frigate, or it could tear their own ship apart. But there was no choice. "Weapon charged," Malik reported. "But, Captain, we get one shot. After that, she's done." Alaric didn't hesitate. "Target the flagship." The bridge fell into a breathless silence. Fire. The ship shuddered as energy surged through the core, coalescing into a brilliant lance of light that tore through the darkness. The beam struck the Concord frigate square in the center. For a heartbeat, it held. Then, with a violent eruption, the enemy ship fractured, breaking apart in a cascade of fire and metal. Gasps echoed across the bridge. "Direct hit," Mara whispered. But there was no time for celebration. The remaining 2 frigates responded instantly, their weapons systems locking onto the human vessel. "Incoming." The ship rocked violently as plasma rounds hammered its shields. Consoles sparked, and alarms screamed. "Shields failing." Malik shouted. "Brace for impact." Hull breaches erupted across the lower decks. Fires spread unchecked, and the ship groaned under the onslaught. Mara was thrown against a console, blood trailing from her temple. Alaric pulled himself upright, gripping the command chair. "We can't take another hit." Mara coughed, struggling to her feet. Alaric's mind raced. The weapon was offline. Shields were gone, but they still had the core. Malik's earlier warning echoed in his mind. We push it any further, and the reactor could blow. Alaric turned to the comms. Malik, prepare to overload the core. A stunned silence followed. Captain, it'll take them with us. Mara's eyes widened. You're talking about a suicide run. Alaric's gaze didn't waver. If we die, we make sure they bleed for it. But then, a flicker of something new crossed Mara's face. Not fear. Hope. Wait, the core's unstable, right? She said quickly. What if we don't blow it up? What if we eject it? Alaric frowned. Eject the core into their formation. Mara continued, breathless. It's volatile enough to go critical on its own. We don't need to die with it. For a moment, Alaric considered it. Then, he gave a sharp nod. Malik, prep the core for ejection. Set it to overload on a delayed fuse. You're insane, Malik muttered, but his voice carried a note of grim admiration. On it. The ship shuddered as the magnetic clamps released. The reactor core, a seething orb of unstable energy, drifted free, glowing brighter with each second. The Concord frigates locked onto it instantly, mistaking it for an escape pod. Too late. The core went critical in a silent, brilliant explosion, a nova of energy that engulfed both ships. When the light faded, nothing remained but debris. The battered human vessel drifted in the aftermath, scarred but alive. Silence filled the bridge, broken only by ragged breaths. Mara sank into her chair, staring at the wreckage. We did it, she whispered. Alaric allowed himself a slow breath. Damage report. Malik's voice crackled through, strained but triumphant. We're holding together, barely. But Captain, we're alive. Alaric looked out at the stars. Then let's go home. News of the battle spread, like wildfire. The Concord's iron grip had been bloodied for the first time in centuries. A single, broken human ship had stood against them and won. On Earth, across scattered colonies, the story ignited something long dormant. Hope. In distant corners of the galaxy, other species under Concord rule whispered of rebellion. And on the rebuilt shipyard, engineers already worked on the next vessel. Stronger, faster, deadlier. Alaric Vance watched the stars from the bridge of his scarred ship, Mara standing beside him. They thought we'd stay grounded, he said quietly. Mara smirked. They were wrong. Alaric's eyes burned with purpose. This was just the beginning.